I don't, am I here? Okay. Do you know why the screen has the city council? Okay, here we go, we're normal. Okay, so I'm gonna have a listen. I'm calling this hearing to an order. For the record, my name is Julia Mejia, City Councilor at Large. I'm the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Small Business and Workforce Development. I'm also the sponsor of this docket. I'm recognizing my colleagues in order of arrival. I'm also joined by my colleague, Councilor Ed Flynn from District 2, Councilor Liz Breeden from District 9, Councilor Andrea Campbell from District 4, and my at-large City Councilor at Large, Anissa Asabi George. This public hearing is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov/citycounciltv. It will also be rebroadcasted on Comcast Channel 8 and RCN Channel 82 and Verizon Channel 1964. We'll be taking public testimony during this hearing. If you wish to testify via video conference, please email cora.montrond@boston.gov for the link. When you are called, please state your name and affiliation and residence, and limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes to ensure all comments have been heard. You may also submit written testimony by emailing ccc.sbwd@boston.gov. In accordance to, and I know that we have some, in accordance to the rules and regarding the issues that are happening right now and due to COVID, we're hosting this particular hearing via Zoom so that we can ensure the safety of our residents. I know that's somewhere in the script. I just don't have it in front of me, but I know that we're supposed to say that. So I'm saying it just in case. Docket 0985, order for a hearing discussing permanence at home entrepreneurs for the city of Boston. Our expected speakers today include Commissioner Dion Irish, who's the Inspectional Service, the Commissioner for Inspectional Service Department, Natalia Ubirte, who's the Director of Small Business for the City of Boston, Office of Economic Development, Chris English, Chief of Staff for Inspectional Services, Catalina Pasafaro, the Director of Policy for the Mayors of Economic Development. And we also are joined, our second panel is Andre Interizari, who is the inspiration behind this particular hearing order, Irene Nakaboni Lagood, and you all are gonna have to school me on saying your name right, because I hate when people mispronounce my name. So when it's your turn to speak, let me know. The founder of Many One Juices, and Shagun Udugun, who is the director of the Boston Economic Council of Massachusetts. I'm going to refrain from my own opening statements as usual, because we are pressed for time. So now I only have like 20 more minutes left, and I've said all of this, and here we go. I'm gonna first start off with Natalia, who I know has to leave at 4:30. So I'm gonna ask you to keep your comments really short. And then I'm gonna go on, I believe that Chris English will also be joining us, and we'll have him speak after you. So Natalia, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much, Counselor. It's always a pleasure to be here. So we'll keep it super brief. You know, my office is here to support all small business owners, all entrepreneurs, anyone looking to engage in the city of Boston in particular. You know, our small mom and pops are the lifeline of our city. So we're really proud to support small businesses. While most of our focus is on our main streets and our, you know, commercial districts, we encourage anyone who is interested in starting a business to reach out to our team. We actually get a lot of folks looking to start new businesses, entrepreneurs, you know, micro enterprises, startups, reaching out to us. And we have a lot of programming, a lot of support systems in place, a lot of technical assistance for small businesses. So we really work with small businesses after they've been established or during that kind of incubation space. So while I don't have any direct ties to businesses that are, springing up from their homes. There's a lot of business owners who work from home and who are, starting businesses every day in their homes. And so we're here to support in whatever way we can. Obviously, anytime it comes with food, and there are other limitations and restrictions there, and just safety guidelines that we have to follow. So I will defer to my colleagues and inspectional services who are experts in this field to really talk through kind of the logistics around establishing a business in your home, especially when it pertains to something that can be dangerous for the public health. So with that, I just want to say that my office is always here, and we're always available for any support to any small business owner. And with that, I'll just say anybody who needs help or wants to connect with our team can either do so on Fridays. We do office hours from 9 to 11 and 2 to 4 every Friday. They're virtual office hours. Anyone can stop by and get their questions answered. We also do a small business conference call every Tuesday at 3 p.m. That's live on Facebook. It's also available via Zoom. And finally, they can email smallbiz@boston.gov. We have capacity in multiple languages, and we're always here to support businesses in whatever way we can. Thank you so much, Counselor.
Thank you, Natalia. I am going to, I don't see Chris English here. Does anyone know if he's going to be joining us?
I think Dan is going to speak on behalf of ISD.
Oh, well, then go ahead, Dan. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Counselor Mejia, and thank you, Natalia. My name is Dan Manning. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of the Health Division at Inspectional Services. I'm a resident of South Boston. My role for inspectional services is primarily around the permitting and inspection of food service businesses throughout the city of Boston. And our motto that we try to operate by is compliance through assistance. And I think that through the pandemic, that's only been amplified and magnified significantly, because we realize the amount of stress and pressure some small businesses or all small businesses are under during the current circumstances. And we've been doing our best to assist every business we can to try to make some of these new creative ideas work in as many applications as possible, ranging from the sale of groceries at convenient restaurants to changing how we manage the takeout operations, and even the outdoor patio seating and all that was a partnership we use with a number of different businesses. The same would be said for this and this idea. So under the, not to bore you all too much code, and I'll keep this as brief as possible, but under the 105 CMR 590.010 for the state's merged food code, home residential restaurants are an allowable function under the food code. There are some regulatory issues around the city's zoning with respect to that, which unfortunately is not my expertise, but I do know it exists from ISD that we would have to address. And then also more specifically from my point of view, which is really solely about the safety of food that is being sold and even given out to the public. There are a whole host of challenges that we'd have to address, ranging from the proper handling, certified management of food, and then also some concerns around the operation within a home that we'd have to work on together to figure out. And then everyone's hearing the term contact tracing quite a bit nowadays, but that's something that the health division's been doing for a very long time. And the reason why I bring that up is because it's one of these things we have to think about is also the where the food comes from, how it gets there, who's handling it, and dealing with that line of that logistical line of food sale to the folks that are going to eventually use this in their home to create food for sale. So we're all ears, and we're here to be helpful through the process. But these just there are quite a few things we're going to have to work through together.
Thank you for that, Dan. Really do appreciate you both being here. And this is why we host public hearings, so that we can bring everyone to the table and decide how can we make things happen? What are the roadblocks to those challenges? And then just take it from there. So really looking forward to engaging you in this conversation and learning, more importantly, about what this looks like in terms of implementation. We were really excited to hold this hearing. The idea actually was a constituent who came to us and really had done some amazing research. So we're really looking forward to unpacking this further. I'm gonna go next to Shagun, because I know you also have to leave at 5. So I wanted to open up the conversation and give you an opportunity to say some remarks. And then I'd love to be able to have a Q&A, a short Q&A with Natalia and Dan before we move on. Okay, Shagun, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, and want to thank you and your colleagues. I think I saw Councilors Campbell and Asabi George and Flynn joining us and members of the city joining us today for this important conversation. So on behalf of BACMA, the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, and our over 300 members, I am grateful for this opportunity to offer testimony in support of docket number 0985, order for a hearing discussing permits for at-home entrepreneurs in the city of Boston. I want to thank you especially, Councilor Mejia, for bringing this conversation to the public space in your continued advocacy for small businesses, particularly those owned by people of color. And really want to commend Mr. Entuzari and his supporters for bringing this issue not only here to the city of Boston, but to other cities and towns in the Commonwealth, and making this a reality. So I commend those efforts to bring this to bear. I'm going to keep my comments very brief because, as I mentioned, as an organization, our board, our members are deeply supportive of the spirit and intent of this effort. And we really encourage your colleagues on the council, as well as those in the mayor's office and city departments to work with you and the community advocates to bring this to bear. I'll only share a few pieces of information as to why something like this is important, particularly for Black and Latinx businesses here in Boston, but also throughout the Commonwealth. Back in April, at a hearing on docket number 0584, which was a hearing order brought together by Councilor Wu and Janie, I believe, to discuss the impacts of COVID-19 on our community, I mentioned at that time that over 60% of our members, of Black business members, indicated not having reserves to last up to 90 days. And this was reported before the state shut down. Over 90% were already experiencing severe economic issues. Half of them were already saying they would have to lay people off. Half of them were experiencing supply chain disruptions. I also mentioned around that time, this is after the first instance of the Paycheck Protection Program, or the first tranche was released by the federal government. At that time, the Center for Responsible Lending had reported that 95% of Black businesses across the country did not gain access to this first round. And that was also true here in the Commonwealth itself. And again, at that time, 41% of Black businesses had reported that they had closed their doors for good. Later that summer, BACMA worked with other organizations like Amplify Latinx, Commonwealth Kitchen, the Foundation for Business Equity, LISC Boston, Mass Association of CDCs, and dozens of other community and nonprofit organizations across the state to conduct a poll with Mass Inc. Polling Group to get a sense of how Massachusetts-based businesses were faring amid the pandemic. This is in July and August. At that point, many people had assumed, foolishly, all of us did, that COVID was going to last for 60 days. And of course, we're kicking ourselves 7 months later. But at that time, over the summer, it showed that 11% of Black businesses here in the Commonwealth had closed their doors, and 8% of Latinx-owned businesses had closed their doors. It also showed that 14% of white businesses had closed their doors at that time. But it's important to put this in the context of the numbers of Black and Latino businesses here in the Commonwealth. For Black businesses specifically, there are about 2,000 Black-owned firms that employ 14,000 people across the Commonwealth. And this is compared to white businesses where there are 187,000, or roughly that number, that employ hundreds of thousands of people in the Commonwealth. And so when we use that statistic of 11% versus the 14%, that number is much more detrimental to Black communities because of the limited number of businesses in our communities. And so that has a tremendous negative impact on the wealth gap here in the Commonwealth. The survey also showed that Black and Latinx businesses are disproportionately represented in the industries of retail, restaurants, hair care, personal care. And this is important because these are the industries that are going to be impacted for decades and decades to come by COVID, even after finding a vaccine, because these are the industries that require some of the most in-person human contact, and folks are just not going to feel comfortable being around others. As much as we yearn to be outside, we're not going to feel comfortable being around large groups of people as we were in the before times. So that's why we're supporting measures like this and others that seek to make it easier for entrepreneurs and small business owners to engage in commerce. You know, we very much commend the city of Boston. I want to commend Natalia and her shop, Chief Barros, and others for the efforts they undertook this summer to help to provide relief to small businesses across the city through the grant program, the millions of dollars they set aside for that, but then taking it one step further, going beyond the state and all 350 other cities and towns in the state where they set up a relief fund to provide for folks to get PPE, personal protective equipment, in order to open their business in a safe manner. So I want to commend those efforts. And so, you know, again, we're going to continue to support efforts that make it easier for business owners to engage in commerce, which is the real way that we sustain our businesses. Grants and loans are important for helping to stabilize the business, but if we want to sustain the business and to ensure their growth trajectory, commerce is what's important. That's why we focus so much on contracting as well. And so, you know, for this effort and the fact that it's supporting those in the food industry, it's going to be really important that we are providing every available opportunity. So I'll close by saying this, that back in April and every other hearing that we've been invited to, we have shared this one particular statistic that shows the importance of minority businesses. The Brookings Institution reported in April that although minority businesses were more likely to shutter during the Great Recession, a time that we're experiencing right now, they helped stabilize the national economy. It was reported that minority-owned businesses helped to add more than 1.8 million jobs across the country between 2007 and 2012, while white-owned firms lost 1.6 million jobs. And so I use that statistic to say that the reason why we were able to add so many jobs was because of the industries that were just aforementioned, the restaurants, retail, hair care, et cetera. And so it's going to be really important and critical that we are supporting folks who remain in these industries to help stabilize them and to make sure they have every avenue and every resource available to grow. So urging again your colleagues on the council, Councilor Mejia, to support any ordinance or any changes to zoning that was mentioned earlier, anything that needs to be remedied to make this possible, but also want to urge city departments and staff to come with the mindset of how to make this happen as opposed to focusing on the barriers. So again, Councilor Mejia and the rest of your colleagues, I appreciate the opportunity to address you today. I'm looking forward to the comments of the advocates, as well as hearing how the city intends to make this come about. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's so great to have you here. I'm going to go, just in the interest of time, I'm going to ask my colleagues if you have any questions for any of the panelists. We're right now just going to be focusing on Dan Manning and Natalia from the administration first, and then Shagun, who has to leave at 5. So I wanted to be able to give my colleagues an opportunity to ask any questions specifically to either Natalia or Dan. So, and I don't see any blue hands. I'm going to assume, I'm going down through the list. Oh, I do see one blue hand. Okay. I'm going to go to Councillor Campbell for very short remarks and questions for either Dan Manning or Natalia Uberti. Councillor Campbell, you now have the floor. Were you just joking?
No, I think we were unmuting all at the same time. So I don't have, I guess, questions, but first of all, thank you all, and thank you for the hearing order. And of course, want to thank you as the maker. It was more, I didn't know if there was other panelists to add more color to the conversation, because when I came in, I wanted to just know more. So hence why I'm on the call. So of course, I appreciate, Dan, Natalia, Aisha from the administration, and of course, what Shagun just said in terms of adding more context and color of how to think about the issue. So I'll give my time to, if there were other panelists, to just understand what is possible here and what's being proposed.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Councilor Campbell. Just in the interest of time, because we're losing both Natalia and Dan at 4:30, the goal was to have them first.
Oh, I missed that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. So I'm just gonna reiterate again for my colleagues who may have come in later, is that in the interest of time, we've asked Natalia and Dan to go first. And then we're going to go into, I haven't even done my opening remarks either, just because we're trying to keep things moving.
All good. I will say, I think we can always get past the barriers and restrictions if it requires changing ISD code or anything else, if the idea is going to help, of course, businesses in this moment in time. So I can save any questions through you as a chair to send later. But thank you guys. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And in the interest of that feedback, because I think it's important if other counselors are still trying to understand the context of this particular hearing order, I'll read my opening remarks so that everybody's having the same conversation and everybody knows what room they're walking into. So we're excited to hold this hearing. This idea was entirely constituent driven, and we want to give as much love as we can to Andre for taking the initiative to reaching out to us. It started out as an idea to allow for residential kitchens, and it just blossomed into a whole discussion around how to support entrepreneurs in a bunch of other fields. There are, as we know, there are also many entrepreneurs in the city whose only problem is that they are facing systemic barriers to capital and other financial resources. Starting a business is hard. I started my own nonprofit, so I know firsthand just how difficult it can be. We need to find new and innovative ways to empower small business owners in our city. The benefit of this proposal are twofold. First, we are supporting entrepreneurs who would not have a source of income to build capital for their businesses. Second, particularly when it comes to residential kitchens, we are finding ways to provide local, culturally competent foods in neighborhoods where other options are limited. We're really excited about this proposal and look forward to hearing from the administration, the advocates, and from members of the public. I also want to take a moment to thank Anna Leslie from the Austin Brighton Health Collaborative and Jen Figo from Commonwealth Kitchen, who both submitted public testimony, which I will read towards the end of this hearing. So I hope that provides us a little bit more context in terms of what we're here to discuss and what we're hoping to get out of it. Again, this is a public hearing, an opportunity for discussion to hear how we can make this a reality. So now I am going to...
Sorry, just before we jump off, can I just say one more quick thing? So I think one thing that would be really helpful for us is, and Andre, it's great to see you. We chatted back earlier in the summer when this idea was first kind of culminating. A couple of things that we were hoping to get is, one, a sense of how many of these entrepreneurs exist in Boston and where do they live? And two, just to get a sense of case studies of other cities that have done this well. In particular, obviously, Boston has a couple different types of restrictions, and knowing that would be really helpful. And again, just reiterating that our offices are really disposed to helping small businesses thrive in wherever they're coming from. And so really getting a better sense of who these folks are and what type of businesses they want to start, because, in particular, as it the kitchen elements that are required in order for you to have a commercial type of kitchen inside your home are really, really expensive. And there are so many great organizations out there, commissary kitchens, that could potentially be a starting point for a lot of these businesses before they go into deep investments that could potentially be really risky before actually kicking off, their companies, their businesses. And so there are a lot of ways, and part of what our office does is try to give businesses some advice and guidance as they're starting their businesses to prevent unnecessary risks, unnecessary debt, unnecessary, restrictions that may come later. So for us, we're still learning. We're happy to partner and connect in whatever ways we can, but it's really important that as we talk about this particular idea, that we bring in kind of the reality component around the expenses and the costs of being able to do this right and do this well in your own home. And so as we think about that, just know that we're open and we're here and we're flexible, and we want to be creative with you all, and encourage folks to come to us if they have any questions about what are the right next steps for their business.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. So I always remain hopeful. I think that Shagun, your comments in terms of really thinking outside the box and pushing ourselves to lead without barriers, I think is just really telling about what the possibilities are in this moment in time. And I think it presents us an opportunity as a city of Boston to recognize that a lot of the barriers that we face are outdated. And we have an opportunity to really change the way we do business, literally, in the city of Boston. And so happy that we can lean on you, Beckma in particular, to really help us identify what that data is that Natalia talked about in terms of what the need and the appetite is for this, and then identifying what are the tools that these business owners will need so that we can ensure that we're providing them with those resources to thrive. So Natalia, thank you so much for bringing that reality into the space, and definitely looking forward to working alongside you to remove those barriers. I'm going to, Councillor Campbell, I'm going to kind of go back and forth a little bit just in the interest of time. Is that okay for me to move on? Do you have any specific questions for Dan? I know he has to leave in a little bit as well.
No, not at all. Thank you.
Yep. And I know that Councillor Flynn, you have your blue hand up, so I'm going to open up the floor to you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. So is this round with city officials? Is that what this is?
Yep, this round right now is just for our two panelists, Natalia and Dan. I believe, I can't see if they're still here. We have other panelists that are lined up, but right now, since they were the two that had to leave earlier, I wanted to get those questions out of the way for them first.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I just wanted to ask if I know Dan very well and Natalia, and I think they both do a great job. Just want to see what impact the pandemic has had on immigrant-owned businesses, especially in what it's somewhat related in what we can continue to do to be helpful to them. I probably represent the most immigrant-owned businesses of any district council, so I want to see what impact it has had. I know it's been devastating, but also what we can do, what we can continue to work on to be helpful.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think what I'm hearing is an opportunity for us to do another survey or just a deeper dive. And that maybe is something that Natalia and her office can potentially do, Councillor Flynn, to help us have a better understanding of how the pandemic has impacted minority immigrant-owned businesses. I'm gonna go to Councillor Arroyo. You now have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is Dan Manning still on?
I can't tell. Let me go through my other view here. No, I know they both had to leave at 4:30, but I do have Aisha Miller, who really is the genie behind all things that are happening at ISD. So if anyone has any responses of what's going on in ISD, I'm sure that Miss Aisha can represent.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work you do, Aisha. So I just wanted to ask specifically, just as I kind of to ground myself in this conversation, do we know what the number of applicants specifically in the city of Boston for at-home entrepreneurship is? Do we have like a number for any of that? Or do we have a number of how many we estimate exist in the city? How many we think are maybe doing it unofficially in the city? Do we have any estimate for that?
Hi, Councilor Royal. So just by complaint driven, we have a total of, that I have is 25 that have been given to me as a complaint.
Meaning that, somebody said they're doing a business and they don't have the licensing for this, and that's how we got those 25?
Exactly. Cooking in their house or selling dinners, that kind of stuff.
And are they concentrated in any one specific area, or are they kind of spread out across the city?
1 second, please.
No problem. Thank you, by the way.
Oh, no problem. I have 5 in Roxbury, 2 in Mattapian, 15 in Dorchester. So that actually is 22 cases.
And they're pretty much in some of our most diverse neighborhoods. So this is definitely, I appreciate that so much. I didn't actually expect that level of detail. So that was great. Thank you. That's basically, as I ground myself in a conversation of what we're trying to accomplish here and for who, it's helpful to know where we're trying to get this off the ground, already, where folks are trying to do this and where folks are trying to get it started. So thank you.
Yes. No problem. And those are mostly like food establishments. If you want the numbers for, folks doing their cosmetology out of their house, I can get those numbers as well if you'd like.
I appreciate that. I would assume those are the two probably most common at home. Maybe one with children and babysitting, I'm assuming might be one, but those are the ones that I would know. I just know that in my district in Hyde Park, we had an instance of somebody who was laid off due to COVID. They were a chef and they started like an at-home takeout service, and they were kind of marketing it on their local neighborhood groups, and they were getting a lot of praise. And then they had to shut down, obviously, because they didn't have any of the proper permitting, and there had been a complaint basically that there's no way to know that they're up to code on any of the food that they're making. But at the same time, that's somebody who was really trying to find a way to make ends meet. They ended up that it has a happier story. They ended up buying a food truck, and I believe they're doing like the food truck permitting. But that's something where if we could have made that step easier for them at the beginning process, in a way of kind of having a way to do that kind of permitting where we can actually monitor that. But I'm very interested in just what the cost of all that stuff is, and all of that. So I look forward to this hearing because I think it's important. And thank you so much, Aisha, for that information. That helps me just know the scope of it.
No problem.
Thank you. Yes, Aisha, and I also really do appreciate you being prepared to answer those type of questions. That really goes to show just what a type of operation you're running. And I really do appreciate you showing up. I don't see any other blue hands. In the interest of making sure that all of my colleagues are up to speed in terms of what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it, I'm now going to continue with our panelists, if that is helpful to my colleagues. And I am going next to, let me catch up here. I'm going to next, where am I? Shagun, I know you have to leave at 5, right? Before we move on,
Yes, I do.
Okay. I'm wondering if you don't mind, if we have 1, 2, 3 more panelists. And if we can limit each of your comments to 5 minutes, that should leave us a little bit of time. I'm sorry, let me back up a little bit because things got a little bit switched up with this last minute. So people got to leave earlier. So I'm wondering if any of my colleagues have any specific questions for Shagun from BECMA. in regards to this particular issue before we move on? I see Andrea Campbell. Councilor Campbell, you now have the floor.
Thank you. My only comment is if you could submit your comments, if they're written to us, because some of that data that you're referencing is such good data, not just applicable for this hearing, but so many of the other initiatives around supporting, of course, businesses of color. And just appreciate and continue to appreciate your leadership with respect to all of these issues and the reframing of how we talk about how important it is to sustain these businesses of color, help them come back online in the future, and how important it is not just for communities of color, but for the entire city. So thank you, and I'll look for the remarks.
Thank you. And if you didn't type them up, you're going to have to now type them up, Shagun. If you spoke from your heart, you're going to have to type all that up. And actually, we can probably transcribe it and send it off. But I think that, you know, we're really blessed to have you in this space with us. And I do agree with Councilor Campbell. I'm going to move on to Councilor Flynn. I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, and thank you, Shagun, for being here and your leadership. I just basically had a similar question to Councilor Campbell. I would be interested in knowing from any of your studies, you know, during the pandemic, how have the financial institutions, how have the banking systems been in lending, in supporting businesses owned by women or businesses owned by immigrants, communities of color, but how have these banking institutions been in terms of supporting these business owners during this difficult time, their access to capital to sustain a business? I just want to try to get a sense of that. I know Councilor Campbell asked similar questions, but I'd like to get a little sense of what these banking institutions are doing, because if they're not coming to the table to support these small business owners, you know, they're setting these business owners up for disaster.
Thank you very much, Councilor Flynn. That's a very important question, and I appreciate it being asked here. I will say that in the early part of the summer, so I think one of the first examples to show how banking institutions were impacting our community either positively or negatively was through the Paycheck Protection Program. In the first round, you had to have a commercial banking relationship in order to get PPP, which is why we saw statistics across the country showing that 90% of all minority-owned businesses did not get access to the PPP. Because when it comes to banks, you know, I'll speak for the Black community that when it comes to our relationships with banks, we either didn't have an account because we would be denied loans because of the history of racism in the country and through banking institutions, or we are very wary of doing business with banks because of the history of predatory lending on our communities, particularly in home ownership. So, you know, in terms of what they're doing now, BECMA itself, I'll speak for us, we have a relationship with Berkshire Bank, where immediately in March of this year, we established something called the Futures Fund, which extends a line of credit up to $50,000 for referrals from BECMA to the institution. That's helped to save a number of our business members. Close to $1 million has been used up for that program. In terms of other banks, you know, we're hoping that other banks will follow the lead of what Malia Lazu did at Berkshire Bank. She just left Berkshire, but she was the president of the Northeastern region. And one of the other programs that she brought in was the Friends and Family Fund, which establishes different terms for minority businesses, which is important because many of us don't have the types of access to collateral that other communities have. And so this program would give up to $20,000 in loans, but would not take collateral. They would take community referrals and feedback and other forms of collateral that weren't really obtrusive to the person. So we would love to see banking institutions doing a little bit more, not only in terms of how much they're giving, but how they're giving it out, because that's really what's going to impact small businesses moving forward. To the other part of your question too, about just how COVID has impacted immigrant communities and communities of color, what I'll do is with my testimony, and I appreciate the comments that Councilor Campbell made, I will attach also the poll that we did with Mass Inc. I'll attach that and some other information so that you can see all of the questions that were asked and how our communities are being impacted.
Yeah, that would be great. I appreciate that, Councilor Mejia. I don't have any follow-up questions, but those types of comments and those questions are what I'd be looking at. So I'd be looking forward to the getting more of that data, and I know that'd be very helpful to all of us. So thank you for sponsoring this important hearing.
Thank you. And don't go yet. We still have a few more folks, so hang tight. I'm gonna go, before you leave, Shagun, I'm gonna ask Liz Breeden. Councilor Breeden has her hand up, so I just wanted to make sure that she can get her questions in before you go. Councilor Breeden, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much. This is another question for Shagun. In terms of, is there a list of banks that are more friendly to these small businesses? I read about the Berkshire Bank's initiative. So many of these businesses are people of color, immigrants, people who are trying to get their feet. And that's what brings so much vitality and diversity to our neighborhoods. It's one of our great strengths in the city of Boston, that we have so much diversity in this particular space with food outlets and just getting people off the ground any which way we can. So is there a list of banks that have a good reputation for this? And is there a role for credit unions in this space?
Well, thank you very much, Councillor, for that question. And I'll work backwards. So absolutely, there is a role for credit unions to play, and would love to speak with you following the hearing about how we can make sure that credit unions are involved in this conversation, because a lot of the times you're right, it's the larger banking institutions that are at the table, and we're not including credit unions. In terms of the banks that are doing a good job, I'm sure they would all want to be listed by their CRA rating based on how well they're doing in our communities. But it's not only just how they're doing with the CRA that will show what relationships they actually have particularly with businesses owned by people of color, but small businesses in general. But I'm happy to put together a list of banks that our members have felt comfortable with, both in our partnership with them, but also just recommending, these are banks that have been good to me. I mean, of course, we all know Eastern Bank, Berkshire Bank, Cambridge Savings, Rockland Trust has reached out to us to ensure that they're doing a better job working with businesses owned by people of color, Citizens Bank as well. But at the end of the day, there is no bank that is doing great. They all could be doing better and should be doing better. And beyond their institutions, they ought to be supporting initiatives by the city of Boston, like their grant program, like their PPE program, to ensure that not just loans are getting to our community, because a lot of us can't take on more debt, but that we are getting grants to our businesses to ensure that they're able to survive the pandemic. And then, of course, beyond the banks, Beckman will continue to work with the city to increase the contracting numbers, because again, for this hearing, for the purposes of this hearing, ensuring that we're driving commerce to our businesses is going to be very critically important after that support is given.
A follow up on that are you folks involved with the Small Business Bureau at the federal? Are you getting any support from that direction?
Yes, so we have an MOU with the Small Business Administration with Bob Nelson, Nadine Boone, and others, working with them to connect our businesses to different resources and programs that they put on.
Thank you. Thank you for all you're doing. It's very important work.
Thank you, Councillor.
That's all for now, Councillor Mejia.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Breeden. I'm just, Shagun, you still got 10 more minutes, so you can hang tight. I'd love to open up the floor to some of our other panelists, just in case, you're inspired to say a few more remarks before you go. Okay, I'm gonna go now, next to on the list, I'm gonna ask, I'm gonna go a little bit out of order here. I'm gonna go to Andre. You were really the inspiration behind this particular hearing order. You brought it to us. You saw a need and you have led the charge. And so would love for you to give us some of your opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. And I've already appreciated and enjoyed the discussion I've heard so far from Sagoon, Councilor Braden, and all the city councilors. So thank you all for what you do, your service to the city of Boston, and to Commissioner Manning and Natalia as well. Thank you to them. I know they're not on, but my name is Andre Intezari. I am a city planning student at Boston University, a staff member at BU School of Public Health, and I also manage a grassroots campaign advocating for Boston to permit retail residential kitchens. So on behalf of my campaign, the reason I'm here today is to ask this committee to amend Boston's zoning code within Article 2A, section on accessory home occupations, to include residential kitchens permitted to produce cottage food products regulated by the Massachusetts Food Code 105 CMR 590, and to develop a permitting process for residential kitchens through the Inspectional Services Division. So if you're not familiar with what residential kitchens are, they are a type of food service permit designated by the Massachusetts Food Code that allows individuals to prepare certain non-perishable foods from their home kitchen, which are referred to as cottage food products, and for direct sale to the public at venues such as farmers markets and other direct to consumer channels. And just for clarification, I know there was some confusion on what residential kitchens are, what they're not. So residential kitchens are not, don't allow producers to sell at wholesale, at supermarkets. Foods that are classified as cottage foods can only be sold. Individuals would still need to have their kitchen inspected, and certified food handlers would need certification to be a cottage food entrepreneur. So there's just some clarity as to what it is, what it's not. And as of August, 23% of Boston's unemployment claimants came from food preparation jobs. Some of these unemployment claims would be alleviated if individuals had the ability to use their home kitchen to start a cottage food business, and offers people that are currently employed a supplemental income to their current job. Again, I just want to appreciate the work that City Council and representatives of departments of the city have undertaken during this pandemic by supporting restaurants, outdoor seating, food pickup campaigns, and providing restaurants with small business grants. And I think residential kitchens is just another way to support Bostonians. I think it's important to note also that cities and towns across Massachusetts already permit residential kitchens, including Watertown, Newton, Somerville, and as of last week, Cambridge City Council has begun discussions on implementing residential kitchens through zoning as well. And as a personal story, as a cottage food entrepreneur myself in Los Angeles, I took up a hobby of making a cultural dried fruit snack called Lava Shack, which fits into the cottage food category. I took the training needed to be a certified food handler, applied for a permit, and was ultimately granted one. In my capacity as a cottage food operator, I was able to sell my product at farmers markets and pop-up food events and meet a diverse array of people in this community. And over the past year, I've been working with the Sustainable Business Network of Massachusetts, other local food organizations, and dozens of potential cottage food entrepreneurs, many of whom are from underrepresented groups in Boston who are eager to start a cottage food business, but don't have the mechanism in place from the city to do so. Again, our campaign is specifically asking for this committee to amend Boston zoning code, Article 2A, section on accessory home occupations, to include permitting of cottage food products regulated by Massachusetts Food Code, and develop a permitting process for residential kitchens through the Inspectional Services Division. Again, I thank you, Councilor Mejia, for your leadership on getting this issue heard, listening to the community, and finding ways to provide opportunities for everyone in the city to thrive. And I thank you all for your time and the discussion that we're ensuing with this.
Thank you for that. And you see why he's the leader of this, and I'm just here to make it all happen behind the scenes. But no, really do appreciate all the work that you've put into this to get us to this far. I'm going to ask, in the interest of just making sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak, I'm going to ask, is Caitlin with us, from the Director of Policy for the Mayor's Office of Economic Development? Are you with us? Does anyone know?
Don't see her, Madam Chair, on the attendee list or the panelist.
Okay, I'm going to move on. I am going to ask Irene K. Nakabong Nugwe. And I know you're the founder of Many Eye Juices, and I need you to school me and let me know exactly how to pronounce your last name. And my apologies for that.
Sure. So my name is Irene Nakabongelugude. I am Ugandan American, and I moved from Brookline, Brighton, after 6-7 years of living in that area to Hyde Park. So I live in Hyde Park now. Hi, Segun. I'm really excited to be here. And Andre, you and I have exchanged a couple of tweets. Council Mejia, forgive me, this is my first time. So the formalities are quite exciting. I am the founder of Mani Juices. It is derived from an African, a Luganda word that means energy, amani. And so the brand is really focused around creating an iron-rich juice. So we focus on iron education and iron deficiency anemia and anemia awareness. So raising awareness around iron deficiency anemia. I work in the world of produce, leafy green vegetables, who are actually excluded in the world of retail residential kitchens. And so Dan Manning had a really good question about contact tracing. I would actually love to share with him some of the things that I'm doing to trace where my produce are going, and also as I've designed my process, because that's actually a relatively easy thing to do. But I'm really here because the barriers to entry to launching a juice brand here in the city of Boston is not easy. It is extremely cost prohibitive for you to get into a commercial kitchen. And everybody you talk to is, they're quick to tell you, oh, by the way, you got to get into a commercial space. You got to get into a licensed space. Unfortunately, we don't have that kind of savings. And some of us are really torn between paying our rent and going, coughing up $4,000 to get into a commercial space. Now, I understand that these laws already exist. And I understand that leafy green vegetables, melon, we're not talking about meat, we're not talking about fish. So we're going to stick with the greens of the world and the fruits of the world. There's a number of us who are in this space, who are making juices here in Boston. And we need the support of the city. And I mean, we appreciate everything that this committee and everybody in City Hall is doing to support the food space. But when it comes to us who have either piloted and we have found our target audiences, we have found our pricing, we have found our revenue models, we had all of that before COVID struck. And then it struck, and then we've been hanging out at home, freaking out just like everybody else, how we're going to pivot. And now the lockdown is lifted and we are just like drowning. So I'm here to ask the city councilor to please, borderline begging here, please take the fruit and leafy vegetables out of the prohibited section, because I'm happy to work with the city for us to help entrepreneurs handle the food safety aspect. This is because during my lockdown, I took this phenomenal class at UMass Amherst on food safety. Right after I took the class, I'm not gonna lie, because I'm in front of my city leaders and fellow peers, I started doing my food safety plan. I started creating my HACCP plan. I started doing my tracing. So if you were to look at my flow, you will know that I get my produce at Shaw's, I bring it in, I instantly put it in the refrigerator, I instantly X, Y, and Z. It's literally, I have a flow chart of how and where my produce is coming from, how it's being handled when I take it to my space for me to start making my juices. And so when it comes to that barrier of, and that challenge about leafy green and melons, we would really, really appreciate the council to really consider, and really not only consider, but do it, right? Where we have actually, juice businesses have the opportunity to also be part of this economy, and also not only just pilot, but also continue building on the amount of work that many Black and Latino, mind you, we're all women, Black and Latino women have made such strides in just like really launching their small little budding ideas and really watering it and busting butt and hauling stuff and everything that you can think of. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm really honored to be able to speak to the committee and fellow community members. But also, it's also important for you to really realize that there are a number of Black and brown women who are in Dorchester, Mattapan, who are not part of Aisha's numbers, who are literally, we're either stuck because I tell my legal team is like, Irene, we want you to do this legally and right. Do not do it in your kitchen. So I'm sitting here like, okay, I can test, I can do all of my planning, but I can't really move anywhere because I am stuck, because there's this big thing on the wrist, leafy green vegetables, I can't do them in my kitchen. So that's where I'll be coming from. But then also, I'm also happy to work with the city to create some of these safety plans, or show you how I've created some of these safety plans, or better yet, implement other opportunities where these food and beverage entrepreneurs, especially juicers, this is specifically for juicers, people who are making juices, can actually implement safety plans, contingency plans. For example, for me, I'm thinking of adding a QR code on my label so that if a person buys my juice, they love it, they can tell me, Irene, we love this, Insta on my blog. Or they can say, hey, Irene, it was a little bit acidic. And that's just me, like, I'm like, oh, wow, cool. I think this is one way I can actually approach the quality assurance and quality safety. And I know that this is something that's a real concern for the council and for the city, in addition to our community, but most importantly to our brands.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Irene, I really do appreciate you being here and keeping it 100%. There are a lot of folks right now who are operating on the down low at home and producing a lot of services, and that's just what we do. Before we move on, I'm gonna ask Shagun if you have any final remarks before we lose you. You want any closing remarks before you go?
Yes, first, hello, Irene. Good to see you.
Nice and good.
I'll echo a point she made about finding space. I mean, I was looking up earlier rents in just Roxbury alone for a retail space, or for or to open up a restaurant or anything, and you're looking at like $5,000 a month in some places in Roxbury. Yeah, so that's not even thinking about other areas where it's more expensive to have a shop there. So again. Just have to reiterate the fact that businesses owned by people of color are helping this economy here in Boston and the Commonwealth to thrive. These businesses employ people. So, these kitchens operating out of someone's home, this is 2, 3, 4 jobs. This isn't just a person living there who are making these products or delivering these services. And finally, just would leave with the council that even if it were just one Bostonian who were doing this, that it's more important for us to prepare for the future rather than waiting for 100, 200, 300 Bostonians who have to, operate in this way, to then think about what a policy would look like to make this available. Again, as I mentioned in my earlier comments, we disproportionately are represented in these industries, food, retail, et cetera. And so there may be many who either have not been recorded by, I see Aisha's here who's doing a great job. And so, not everyone complains about the neighbor and reports them. So there may be many more who are operating in this fashion, but there will be many more operating in this fashion because they're not getting the support they need from the state or from the federal government. And will not be. We just saw that President Trump is delaying this relief until after the election. So there are going to be many more who have to operate in this way. So again, just would urge the council and those who work for the city to work on how to make this possible, how to make it safe and effective and efficient to prepare for the wave of businesses that are going to have to operate this way in the coming months and years.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. We really do appreciate you and all the work that you're doing on behalf of all of our businesses in the entire Commonwealth. But more importantly, much love to Boston. I see that Councilor Asabi George, you have your hand up and wanted to know if you had a comment or question that you want to.
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to Andre and Irene and Sugun for being with us and sharing their experiences and information with us. I am curious about the role of commercial kitchens, cooperative commercial kitchens, like Commonwealth Kitchen, for example, and other facilities like that. How could they potentially be supportive in this business? And then I'd also like, I know that it isn't sort of the theme of today's hearing, but to understand the role of non-food businesses in within this industry. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. So I'm not sure if, Andre, you have any feedback. I can give you some context, Councilor Asabi George, in regards to non-residential kitchen businesses. We have heard from folks who are hairstylists who can't afford to open up shops. So they're looking for an opportunity to be able to open up literally in their own homes to do hair. We've also heard from tailors, people who sew and fix clothes, who are interested in opening up, at least incubating in their homes, and ideally getting enough revenue eventually to open up a brick and mortar. We've heard from folks who are doing lip balms, and or nails, that are looking to do nails at home. So it's just been a pretty diverse of folks who are interested, that are not just specifically around home kitchens, but just a plethora of different types of businesses that are looking to incubate. And what we've heard is, because of the zoning, and because from what we've learned so far, is that a lot of folks where you can potentially open up a business are on commercial streets, like major arteries like Washington Street, Dorchester Ave. Like if you have a residential home that is in one of these major streets, they're already kind of set up for commercial, so it's easier. But some of the folks who live on side streets, those are the ones who are also experiencing some roadblocks. But I'm going to go to Andre if you want to talk a little bit more around some of the residential kitchen. Then I'm going to go to Councilor Breeden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your question, Councilor Asabi George. From what I understand, and what this would provide is a potential for relieving commissary kitchen, Commonwealth Kitchen of entrepreneurs, especially with the demand that they're receiving now with confined quarters, of the ability to have individuals that are in that space to produce potentially hazardous foods that are above the requirements of residential kitchens. Those would still be able to operate at Commonwealth Kitchen, but it would relieve the pressure of having an over demand of cottage food producers that are making less hazardous foods in their home kitchen at those shared kitchen spaces.
I appreciate that. And I do want to just note to Irene that I am drinking my juice today, and I wish I were drinking your juice, I think.
Hopefully soon.
So I hope to be doing that soon, and promoting it when I am on in one of our hearings doing that. I appreciate this hearing, Madam Chair. I think that it's certainly a very interesting topic. There's certainly some concerns around the health and safety of foods that are produced at home and in a home kitchen. But I think there are some real opportunities for us to support our entrepreneurs here in the city of Boston, across all of our neighborhoods. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I'll just read, while we're on this topic of Commonwealth Kitchen, is a statement that Jen prepared for us. I was going to read it during public testimony, but figure while you're still here, Councilor Asabi George, let me just read it. It's at home Commonwealth Kitchen. We definitely see a lot of food businesses coming to use our facilities that should really be able to start from a home kitchen and scale up into a facility like ours, especially folks doing baked goods and desserts. Most surrounding municipalities have far lighter restrictions on these types of retail businesses, which must be permitted by the local health department. FYI, retail food permits, meaning food that is sold directly to the consumer, like food trucks, restaurants, caterers, farmers, markets, vendors, etc., are issued through the city. Wholesale permits, meaning food that is sold to an intermediary, oh my God, that word, I can't pronounce it, like a grocery store or a restaurant, and then sold to a consumer, requires a state DPH permit. ISD's concern is safe food handling during production and maintaining proper temperature controls during the delivery process to be sure food is safe to eat. Not all products, service, or processes should be allowed to be produced in a home kitchen like frozen dinners. But baked goods, hot sauce, high in acid, and small scale catering ready to eat home delivery should be allowed with proper training and record keeping. We are in favor of seeing this change, as it leads to more people legally testing out running their businesses before putting all of their time and energy and expense of having to open their own kitchen or come to a work shared space like ours. Thank you to the members of the public and to the panelists for their testimony. That's my part. So basically, that was submitted by Jen from Commonwealth Kitchen, Councilor Asabi George. Hopefully you find those remarks helpful. I'm gonna go on to Councilor Breeden, and then I know, Aisha, you were not set up to my lineup, but since Commissioner Irish is not here, would love to have you, if you feel comfortable, to kind of share a few remarks with us, if you don't mind. And I mean, if you do, I totally understand. You were not slated to speak, but you always got something dope to say. So hopefully you'll be willing to chime in. I'm going to go to Councilor Breeden, and I also want to recognize that we've been joined by Councilor Bach as well. So Councilor Breeden, you now have the floor.
So I really feel that that permitting home kitchens is an important piece of the puzzle, but I also feel that there's probably space or a need for more of these cooperative commercial kitchens. And one big concern for me here in Alston Brighton is that we are developing so much of our space that was formerly light industrial, which would have been an affordable, low-cost location for such enterprises, is those spaces in our neighborhood, and I'm sure it's happening in other neighborhoods across the city, that those spaces are being bought up and they were zoned for light industry, but now they are becoming residential, more upscale, less affordable residential spaces. So I really feel that in terms of, we need to look at the zoning code, but we also need to preserve spaces in our neighborhoods for light industry and things like cooperative kitchens and other sort of facilities in our neighborhood that are like the first step for your entrepreneurs to get started and test their product and get their business going before they can scale up. It shouldn't be the case that when you get to scale up that you have to go and relocate to Waltham or Watertown or somewhere further out of the city, because there isn't space in the city to do that anymore. And I really feel quite passionately about that. So that's my piece. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I see that Councillor Bach, you have your hand up and you now have the floor.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to say, Madam Chair, I'm sorry to have joined late, and sorry to the panelists for only getting some of your testimony, but just really want to thank you for holding this and say, I think it's a hugely important topic. And I really agree. There's a lot of, I think, you know, there are a lot of types of businesses where we could do this and still have, you know, totally reasonable health and safety measures. And I wanted to just say that I did some research in a prior life about kind of the history of zoning. And as Councilor Mejia knows, we've been, and my other colleagues, we've been working a lot on fair housing zoning. But one of the things that I remember learning and being really kind of horrified by, looking back at the advent of zoning in the 19-teens, 100 years ago, was that actually there was a deliberate strategy in a lot of cities in this country to take what had been mixed zones and rezone them as residential only, precisely because a lot of immigrants and people of color had home businesses where you needed to have, right, this commercial space on the ground floor and then a house above it. And so it was seen as, what happened was in 1917, the Supreme Court said you can't zone your city by race. And a bunch of the southern cities have been trying to do that, like saying this block is white, this block is black. And so they came back, and we talk a lot about the fact that one of the strategies was single family zoning and saying, oh, if you can only live here if you're wealthy enough to own your own house. But another piece that we don't always talk about was that actually getting rid of those mixed use zones and going to commercial residential hard split was also a strategy on those fronts. And I think about the fact I live on a residential street. I talked in the council meeting last week about how the oldest house in Beacon Hill was built by an African-American man in the late 1790s. It's on my street. And actually he built it with a business partner, and the business partner ran his salon, he was a hairdresser, ran it out of the house for 20 years, right? And you couldn't have a salon there today. And so I just think it's really important to remember that we have to proceed thinking about health and safety and all kinds of reasonable rules and community buy-in and all of that. But I think we have to have this history in mind and remember that that with it in mind, you know, there are real equity reasons to make some of these adjustments. So just want to thank you again, Councilor Mejia, for calling this hearing, and all of you for being here today.
Thank you. The historian of the family, Kenzie Bach, people. I'd like to ask my dear friends and always the one with the best response rate of anything that we need across the entire city. There has not been one constituent situation that has come across my email, my Facebook, my text message without Aisha Miller raising her hand, coming to the rescue literally on so many occasions. And so Aisha, I would love to give you an opportunity to share some of your remarks or just reflections or just some things that we should think about as we move forward with this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak, although yes, I was not prepared to do so. However, ISD Inspectional Services, as you know, is an enforcement agency, and that's what we're known for, but we're also known for making sure we assist those who need our help in different aspects of the city. So I am very grateful for you, Madam Chair, bringing this to the forefront. We are embarking on something right now in our city and just America that none of us have ever experienced before. And we have to find ways to navigate to make sure that everyone is not losing out in this time. Irene, I can't wait to drink your juice, by the way. I'm excited for that. And Andre, thank you for your advocacy around this issue. So I'm not gonna say much, but I just want to thank all of you for being here and bringing this to us. One of the things ISD is, our mission is to protect the life safety of all of the residents in the city of Boston. And in doing so, there are things that we have to make sure that we look at before anything is brought to fruition. So, Madam Chair, I again, thank you. I also look forward to working with you on the constituent side. My colleague, Assistant Commissioner Dan Manning, who again is the Assistant Commissioner for the Health Division, is eager to work with you as well and find out ways we can think outside the box, not as Shagun stated, thinking about the barriers, but how we can just work through those. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. I also want to acknowledge the administration for showing up and being all in this conversation. I really do appreciate the level of thought and actually intentionality about how do we get to where we need to be, from the small businesses to your department, really thinking outside of the barriers, if you will, and working collectively to bring this forward. So I really do appreciate Mayor Walsh for his early support and being engaged in this conversation and making sure that we're all having the same conversation so that we can move our constituents forward. So really grateful to the mayor for that. I would love now, I see, and you all know any hearing that I'm hosting, you're always gonna be, all over the map here because I like to do things different. I'd like to now, I have a few questions for Andre and Irene. I didn't get to ask them earlier because I wanted my colleagues to go first, but I'm just curious, Andre, if you could talk to us a little bit about, first, thank you so much for your testimony. Really do appreciate you leading this. My first question is just how many people do you know that you have in your network who are interested in this type of permit? And can you talk a little bit about your experience applying for a permit to be certified as a food handler in Los Angeles, and what was the process like, and how can we use Boston as an example to make it better?
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. I, just to your first question, I have a similar number to the number Aisha mentioned, about 20 to 22 people that I've contacted that are interested in cottage food operation, but can't do so. And more than that, I have a listserv of 150 supporters who want to see something like this enacted in the city, to participate and to buy from vendors that are residential kitchen operators. To your second question about how I navigated the process, it was really happenstance. I didn't really want to get into this. I moved from Los Angeles to Boston hoping to pick up where I left off with my cottage food operation there. And then I found out that the city didn't allow it. And that's really where my advocacy began. I reached out to ISD, that they said this is not something that they allow. They said this is a zoning issue. I reached out to zoning, and I got a rigmarole of going to different people and finding out that no one had the answer, a concrete answer as to what to do or who to direct me to. So it was really a frustrating process. But at the end of the day, I talked to people at ISD and zoning that says this is not something based on the current Boston laws that can be allowed. So that's really where I began my advocacy effort, and built a network and got to know a lot of people in this space. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, absolutely. It gives us something a jumping point to continue not just only advocating, but to figure out how can we start removing those barriers. I'm gonna go next to Irene. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences when it comes to trying to start a brick and mortar? I'm particularly interested when it comes to the banking aspects that like Councillor Flynn mentioned earlier.
So with Mani, I'm still in my super early stage. Last year, 2 years ago, I ruptured my Achilles tendon. And so I spent the fall season of 2018 learning how to walk again. And then I decided to learn how to sell in that process because I thought I was going to do a Kickstarter campaign to raise my first round of money to formulate my juice line. But then in interviewing a number of commercial kitchens, I realized that I actually didn't need a Kickstarter campaign, that I could actually build my brand that way. And it was when I got into MIT Startup Spotlight that in addition to testing, so yes, I was making this in my home and I was having people over, I was having parties and people were coming over and they were sampling my recipes that I've been creating over the last 6 years. So this isn't something that's just been like popped up. I've been working on this for a hot minute. Long and short, I had no interest in brick and mortars, but what I am interested in applying for grants. applying for grants is really tough if you do not have any history. And like Segun mentioned, if you don't have a banking relationship with a commerce bank. Now, I just signed up, I just registered my business, Mani, with the Secretary of State. And everybody now is telling me, this is the most important thing that you have done. And this is one thing that's actually prevented a lot of Black and brown business owners not getting any loans through the PPP loans. Now, I've only applied for 4 grants, and I'm getting ready to apply to get into a cohort of juice entrepreneurs. But those 4 grants, they're really short to apply to write. I'm assuming 750,000 people are applying for them. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but like everybody needs money. And I mean, who's going to write you a check of $15,000? It's not going to be your mom or dad, at least for Black and brown families. They're simply not going to do it. When they don't have the money. I'm sure mom and dad would do it if they had the money, but let's be honest here, right? I'm an immigrant, right? I've worked here in the city of Boston for a very long time. I'm very proud to be a resident of this wonderful state of Massachusetts, and I'm grateful for the many resources that are available to me. But it's extremely hard for you to get a loan or a grant when you do not have any kind of revenue. And especially like when you're like literally Fred Flintstone in your way, you're like, I have momentum, I'm going. And you're really excited and you're connecting with customers. They're giving you feedback, they're engaging with you. And then you fall short rather, right? And that shortage really is getting into a space. Now, for me, over this last few weeks, I've been walking, like scratching my itty bitty brain. Who do I talk to? Here in Hyde Park, I spoke to Till right across the street from me. I spoke to Jana over at the Guild, and she had this wonderful idea. Irene, why don't you just knock on restaurants that are going down and see if you can connect with a restaurant owner, a group. And so guess what? I called Jim Solomon. I'm like, Jim, I need your help. You know, he tried to get me into a temple back in Brookline. And like, we're scratching our brains, and it is extremely hard, really, really hard. I think that to your point and everybody's commentary about this important barrier is that if we create a co-op, and this goes back to Jana's suggestion of like a group of us getting together and getting into a space collectively, that would be phenomenal. Like a co-op space where you can pilot, right? You have resources. I mean, obviously you're doing all of the work, right? You're contributing to the co-op space somehow, some way. That would be just really fantastic if the cottage kitchen laws do not get passed, especially for us juicers, those that are making juices, because I understand the importance for safety and I am all for it. And once again, I have learned, I've like mastered the space at this point, and I'm happy to work with the city. But if that's not the case, the co-op, Councillor Brendan mentioned is a really, really, really great idea because it has potential. And once again, supporting other, mainly women entrepreneurs who are immigrants, who are working one job or maybe, you know, chasing their own dreams.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I really do appreciate your thorough answer. And I think it's really important to recognize that a lot of immigrants in particular, we come to this country already with skills, talents, but we just fall short because we don't have the access to capital or the know-how. Yeah. We know that we have a lot to contribute. And I think that this can also help close that wealth gap that we keep talking about if we create opportunities for folks to be able to have thriving businesses. So 100% with you on that. I would love to, in the interest of just making sure that we we do have some public testimony. We have one person who's already in the room, in the Zoom with us. And we just have one testimony signed up, one public testimony. Nicola is here. And so I'd love to open up the floor to her. And then I'd like to give each of my counselor colleagues an opportunity just to have some closing remarks. So stand by for that. Nicola, thank you for joining us. You now have the floor. And you have to unmute so we can hear your beautiful voice.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councilor Mejia and all the city councilors. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you for the opportunity to give a public testimony. I want to appreciate Irene as an entrepreneur and Andre as an entrepreneur and activist and advocate to bring this attention to you all and the community. I'm a business owner for 25 years. I run a marketing firm that focuses on sustainable food and culture. And I organize 7 festivals a year, of which 3 of them or 4 of them have been in the top festivals in Boston. You must have heard of them. One is the Boston Local Food Festival, which is New England's largest one-day farmers market on the Greenway, the largest festival on the Greenway. I'm also on the board of Sustainable Business Network, and that event is a program of SBN. And I also organize the Boston Jerk Fest, and I appreciate working with the city of Boston in permitting. And the fact that they're at the table here in terms of the inspectional services says a lot, and they've been very helpful. I think SBN is the Greater Boston Buy Local Group. So we are one of 9 organizations statewide that works directly with food entrepreneurs, farmers, value-added producers, etc. We also organize a B2B event at Northeastern every year to connect food businesses with suppliers and institutions like the Northeastern University, the colleges, the convention center, etc. And each of those 2 key food events reach more than 100 food businesses that are really hustling and trying to connect and grow and increase their capacity to serve food to the community. We work a lot with entrepreneurs of color, and I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs have come to us, and me in particular in some of the festivals that I organize, basically crying, cannot find a place, a kitchen to rent, to access, so that they can make their product to share with the community. It is a challenge because a lot of these entrepreneurs, or some people call street food vendors, are seasonal, and their season starts in March and ends in basically October. And the revenue that they make supports their family for the year. So can you imagine with the pandemic that we're experiencing, basically their whole season is gone. No revenue this year for these entrepreneurs. And they make typically between $4,000 and $7,000 per festival, depending on how many people show up and the weather. But I can't tell you how many people don't have access. And why don't they have access? One, they're limited access because of commissaries. The commissaries tend, like Commonwealth Kitchen, who's doing an amazing job, which we collaborate with, they usually have people who are year round. They're not seasonal. They can't support the seasonal. The demand is already high to access that. So seasonal businesses or startup businesses have very limited options. And if you do rent these kitchens, some who try to take the chance because they make a lot of money at the festival would pay upwards of $1,000 for one day, because it includes all the things that it takes to run a commissary, the insurance, the space, etc. So it is a barrier, financial barrier for these businesses who are either trying to start and grow or work seasonally and do very well. And many of them are culturally connected, offer culturally connected foods. And so reviewing the zoning laws also is something very important. I live in Cambridge. Most of my work is in Boston. The city is reviewing our zoning tables to make sure that it's more friendly to food businesses, especially small food preparers. There is some precedent in California. The law AB 626 is a micro enterprise home kitchen law that was signed on January 1st, 2019. And it was designed to help and support the same type of kitchens that we're advocating for. There are some criteria that would help, and I'm sure that Andre might have shared that information, but we could at least look at some models like that. And like Segun mentioned earlier, let's be creative and let's look at opportunities instead of the barriers of why it can't happen. And let's look at opportunities to see what we can make happen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We always have to remain hopeful and not lead with being helpless. So thank you for those lasting words of wisdom. I'm going to now share a public testimony that was submitted via email, and this is from Anna Leslie, who's the director of the Austin Brighton Health Collaborative, who wrote, "Residential kitchen permits are an effective and affordable way to expand local food access and stimulate a local economy. The Austin Brighton Health Collaborative operates the Brighton Farmers Market. We frequently have neighborhood food Austrians inquiring about how to sell their product, but the barriers to production prevent them from scaling. Two of our vendors this year, Sini Coffee and Homestead Fresh Microgreens, are Brighton residents operating small businesses that are trying to scale. At-home permits will make their business more affordable and achievable." So needless to say that there's literally an appetite for this. What we need to do now is identify ways that we can remove these systemic barriers that prevent people from thriving in these businesses. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, and more importantly, how do we go from a public hearing to a reality?
And it is, but
yes, I bet you that was Councilor Breeden who did that. Just joking. I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you. I would like to just, seeing that there are no other public testimonies, I just want to thank again the panelists, the administration, the advocates, and those who are out here every single day pushing us to think outside the box so that we can move our city forward. And I'd like to just mention that the next steps for us is to bring this conversation to the rest of the council, give a recap of what we discussed here, and hopefully we will follow up with a working session and continue to figure out how we can make this a reality. From what I'm hearing, there's still a lot of red tape, if you will, that we're gonna need to explore and figure out how we can remove so that we can ensure that folks are able to operate out of their homes successfully and safely. So without any further ado, I'm not gonna hold anyone hostage. I'd like to thank my colleagues for participating in this and give you an opportunity for any closing remarks to my colleagues, if you have any. Now will be the time for you to raise the little blue hand or speak. I see Councilor Block, you now have the floor. Closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. No, I just would say I learned so much just even in the last 40 minutes. And also I've been receiving a huge number of letters and communications from folks about this. So I really think it's focusing on something that we need to do and that there's a real appetite for. And it was something that I think we probably needed to do before COVID, but obviously COVID has helped us see the necessity here. So thanks again, Councilor Mejia, and thank you to all the panelists.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Breeden, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to all the panelists. I've really enjoyed today's discussion. I'm excited about the potential to really move this forward. If we all work together, I think we can. And I look forward to the working session whenever that happens. Thank you, Councillor Mejia.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again. And I'm looking forward to the next steps. Andre, Irene, Nicola, thank you so much for being here. And I want to give a big shout out to my policy director, Jacob, who really spearheaded all of this, and the entire City Council staff for always showing up and doing your due diligence to make sure that we sound and look good. Thank you for all the work that you do. And let me just make sure that I say this right, because apparently if we don't, it's not. So I will now draw this hearing to a close. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to engaging you in the dialogue. Thank you. Bye. Okay, thank you. Now I can leave here. Bye, guys. I'm still here. Bye, Arlene. Bye, Nicola.